Emily, when I first knew you, you were a journalist,
Yes.
and then you turn up as a director of a new project in a very prestigious journalism school in a very prestigious American university. How did you get there?
I guess two things. One of which is that you and I really know each other because we worked together on the Observer, and you were covering the technology patch from a thoughtful commentary perspective, and I was tempted to do it from a scrabbling reporter perspective at the time. But my journalistic background had meant that I spent a lot of time looking at the very early days of the application of the web to commercial businesses in the UK. And I became increasingly sort of interested in how this was going to affect the field of journalism. And so I was able to sort of translate that into practice at The Guardian for about 10 years, running their web properties. And then somebody rang me up from Columbia University who said, I'm sure you're too busy doing journalism, but we're starting a new centre here for digital journalism, and you clearly know a little bit about it. And so I pursued that partly because at the time, being even in a great organisation like The Guardian, which was very forward-thinking and extremely empowering, I think we got to a stage with that digital transition in the newsroom where I felt like I wasn't learning enough, and I also knew that the integration between journalism and technology was really speeding up. And I'm not a technologist. I've written about it for a long time. I've worked with technologists. And part of the attraction of going to Columbia was really to sort of spend some time and help build something that would hopefully strengthen journalism by bringing together the fields of computer science and journalism much more closely, which is really a new field. You know, we have data journalists, but that field was new. So that was the backstory.
Okay. And in that period when you've been at Columbia, you've been watching the gathering pace of social media and its increasing impact on journalism. Is that what lay behind your choice of a topic for this series?
Yes, I think that we spend a lot of time both thinking about what's coming down the line. So we talk to people who are in academic disciplines, often in computer science departments, but we also spend a lot of time talking to people who are in the practice and in the field. You still have the great luxury of going into other people's newsrooms and talking to particularly their heads of strategy or the heads of technology. And in the last 18 months, I think as one journalist put it to me, the next 5 years about being a journalism organisation is all going to be about Facebook. And that's not specifically just Facebook, but actually broadly, I think that's true, because what we're seeing is the open web, or what we think of the open web and the browser-based website where we'd all have 20 or 30 tabs open, moving into a predominantly mobile world. And we're seeing an unprecedented boom of the time that people spent online, but we're also seeing a shift in behaviour and the power dynamics around that. And the social media companies and the search companies like Google and Facebook and the mobile companies like Apple are able to control that world in a way that journalism never will be able to again.
So in that sense, traditional journalistic outlets, newspapers and magazines and so on, they once controlled both the creation of the content and its distribution. And your feeling is that, at least on the distribution end, that's really changing.
I think that's right. I think when we look at how people just look at user behaviour. So the user behaviour means that you and I, as news consumers, will now spend an increasing amount of time picking links up. You know, not reading the full package anymore. I've got a pile of unread papers at home. I love them. I love newspaper. I love the idea of being published. But the truth is that I do all my reading online, and I would say, 90% of it through my iPhone. And I'm not unusual in that sense. So that link, if you like, between the newspapers putting papers on trucks and driving them to the distributors or the corner stands, and even the broadcasters having licensed bandwidth to get into your home and saying we're going to have a news bulletin at 8 o'clock. In truth, that's already gone, because even once you're going through, say, an Apple app store, even if it's your own app, you have to meet Apple standards to be able to do it. And that's going to affect the kinds of things that you're able to offer your audience. It means that you're detached a little bit from that relationship that you had before, which was much more direct.
And that implies a serious shift in power in the end.
I think it's, we talk about network effects, which is this idea that in network economics, and when you look at how technology businesses have grown, it's this idea that once you've essentially sort of got your central product, every time you add another person to the network, it doesn't really cost you anything. So scale is what drives all of these companies. So social networks have worked because they were able to address a social problem, which was how do people talk to each other through an engineering. It was that they approached it as engineers, and they got a design solution for it. And you look at, if you want to sort of look at modern broadcast, you might look at something like Twitter, which is actually an internet protocol. But again, it designs a system whereby everybody can communicate simultaneously in real time with anybody else who is on the platform. And Facebook has a more closed platform technology where it requires you to be signed in. It doesn't publish everything that you might write to the outside world unless you allow it to. And I think that, kind of that it's become, those have become the default mechanisms by which the world not just reads, but it also discusses and disseminates, comments on, publishes its own material in response to things the events that are happening in the world.
But what that means is that platforms, let's call them that, like Facebook or Twitter, have acquired a new status in the in our information ecosystem, and it's not clear to me that they understand the responsibilities that brings with it. Is that right?
I think that's right. I spent quite a bit of time with a number of platform companies in the last year or so, and two things to remember. First of all, really Facebook, which was, I think, sort of founded about 2004, but wasn't really publicly available until 2006, 2007, and Twitter, which wasn't even a company until 2008. First of all, the thing to understand is how quickly they've grown. So Facebook now has 1.5 billion people on the platform. The challenge to the company of keeping up with that growth is incredible. And at the same time, I think that these are not organizations that are full of people with the experience of dealing with what happens when you are the editors and arbiters of public discourse and events in the outside world. And the other thing to remember is that a lot of these people come from a very specific culture, which is the West Coast engineering culture. And a lot of that is about making things easy for people to do. So, the idea of really sort of top-class engineering is that it takes inefficiencies out of any system. And of course, when you take inefficiencies out of cultural systems, you can unleash things that you really don't know where they're heading. So I don't think that Mark Zuckerberg or any of his product team would have predicted that they would now be a platform that a government wants to talk to about how they combat terrorist propaganda. I think Twitter started off saying we want the world to communicate with each other. But they couldn't possibly have foreseen that pretty much every politician, every journalist, every activist in the world who wants to matter and have an impact would be using their platform to the extent that they are.
And do you think it's the case that this has now happened, as you've described it, but that a good deal of the world has yet to twig that this has happened?
Well, I think that journalists we like to deal in slightly doom-laden prophecies because it gets people to pay attention to more complex problems. But it's certainly sort of my observation, and by looking at the underlying data. So first of all, if you look at just how many people now use a social platform as their default portal to news. So first of all, you know that actually the usage suggests that these are becoming major platforms for how people discover news, even if they're not actually reporting the news themselves. And I don't think that behaviour is going to reverse. So I can't see yet a world in which people don't want to consume or even create all sorts of varieties of information and opinion and whatever kind of the multimedia world brings from just one channel. I just think that sort of world of, we're just going to go to Walter Cronkite at 8 o'clock, we're just going to read The Guardian in the morning. We all want to retreat into those worlds sometimes. But in general, I think in our daily lives, we want to know as much as we possibly can, as fast as we can. So the idea that this is a fad is wrong. And I think sometimes with technology and change, part of the interesting and sort of fascinating nature of the world is to really be able to discern what's, if you like, the moving body of water and what's the foam on top of the wave. And the foam on top of the wave will blow away, and the moving body of water may well sweep away whole cities and villages in its progress.
Thank you.